When we were young, we read more often because we had to. It was the only way for us to get knowledge and to be enlightened. Read to your heart's delight and be enlightened. Let's just read. It's a podcast by Andy's Personal Development. Stay tuned for more reading and enlightenment. Our next guest on Let's Just Read is an avid baker and yogi with a career in the banking industry across continents. She was inspired by her personal story to write a book entitled Memoir and Me, a new inspiring mother-daughter memoir that presents how to overcome hardship, loss, and heartache and emerge stronger from each experience. This is our guest. And this is Memoir and Me. So let's welcome this amazing and inspiring writer. There she is, Farah, live on Let's Just Read. So hi, this is Andy of Andy's Personal Development, and we are currently live in the studios of Let's Just Read. And we have a special guest today who has a very intriguing and enlightening story with much value for life and for the education of someone's ability to overcome and rediscover a new identity. She's an avid baker, yogi, with a career in the banking industry across continents. And she was inspired by a personal story to write a book entitled Memoir and Me, a new inspiring mother-daughter memoir which represents how to overcome hardship, loss, heartache, and emerge stronger from each experience. Welcome, Farah, to Let's Just Read. How are you doing today?
Hey, Andy. I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me on your show. Really happy to be here.
Happy to have you, and thank you so much for joining us here on Let's Just Read. I want to quickly go through some information that I'm seeing here, and it's really intriguing because it says that you were born in London, but raised in North India, where you were educated at a Catholic convent in a historic Muslim society surrounded by Hindu mythology. Wow.
I see you had to take a breath there at the end.
Yeah. Only you can describe that for us. Share some of those moments with us as much as you can remember, please. It sounds like so much.
It was, and I think the part of it is, as a child, I don't think you appreciate what you're experiencing, and it's only when you become an adult that in the fullness of time you realize how rich that upbringing was. So as you said, I was born in London. I'm a Parsi by faith, so the religion is Zoroastrians. We're ancient Persians, for your listeners who would be familiar. And when I was about 4 years old, my mother, we were living in London. It was very cold in the winter. So Mom said, let's go see my maternal grandmother who lived in northern India. My mother was from India.
Yeah.
And when we were there, my father's mother, my paternal grandmother, called my mom to say my father, who had a good job, had left his job, was dating someone else, was being unfaithful to my mother. So my mother made the choice not to return at the time. And the days sort of rolled into the months, and then Mom made the decision to send me to the school she went to as well. So the same school. So for those that are familiar, in India, the missionaries had come and they had set up schools. So the convents are the equivalent of a private education where you would go.
Right.
And the nuns were from all over the world. So they were Catholic, they were Irish, they were Scottish. We had some Indian nuns as well. And they were all in this hometown called Lucknow, which is quite a historic city. It was part of the mutiny of 1857. If you're on the other side of history, they call it the uprising,
Yeah.
but it was historic.
Okay.
And it was a city ruled by Nawab, so very steeped in Muslim culture. And yet you're surrounded by Hindu mythology, which is, part and parcel of India.
Mm-hmm.
So as a child, it's just organic. You're meeting people, you're talking to people. I would say Hail Mary in the morning. I would
Yeah.
come home and it would be a different conversation. And I would sit with friends who were Hindu or Muslim, and you wouldn't blink. You wouldn't even stop to think about the differences. It was just, we were people all living together, and friends and family friends. So it was a very diverse,
Yeah.
but just a really enriching experience growing up.
Wow. Thank you for sharing, Farah. I really appreciate that. I just want to dwell on the history a little bit, because I think that your heritage and everybody's heritage actually is quite important, particularly in the formulative years of our lives, as you just alluded to. And I'm thinking that the term Parsi, and I'm looking at it, and I realize that it came out of a desire to get away from Muslim persecution in ancient Persia. We're looking at the period between the 8th and the 10th century, where your ancestors would have come through, and they headed to India, places like Hyderabad, Pune, Kolkata, Gujarat, and so on. How
Mm.
important was that connection to you, that you found out later, and realizing, hey, this is my history? I mean, even back to the time of antiquity. And how formulative was it for you to engage yourself now in it, and it becomes part of who you are today?
I think you've touched on the history, absolutely, but I think the Parsis are the Persians that came from a port called Pars.
Yeah.
So that's why their term is Parsi, the ones that came to India. So the religion is Zoroastrian, but only the Parsis are the ones that came to India.
Okay.
And when we landed in the port of Surat, the king came to meet the priest on the shores that had brought the people in the boat.
Yes.
And one of the conditions that he sort of said to the priest, and one of the conditions for the asylum was that the priest or the Parsis would not look to convert anyone to their religion, because
Okay.
they'd already experienced the missionaries and the Christians and trying to
Yes.
convert people,
Yeah.
and they didn't want the same. So the priest asked the king's people to bring a glass of milk and some
Mm-hmm.
sugar,
Mm-hmm.
and he spooned the sugar into the milk and stirred it and said, "We will be like the sugar and the milk. We will dissolve into your culture to
Wow.
make it sweeter, but we will not convert anyone."
Okay.
So even to this day, Parsis don't convert. You can't convert. Both your parents have to be Parsis for you to be Parsi. There are, other sort of younger offshoots of the religion where
Mm-hmm.
you could
Mm-hmm.
have one parent,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the essence of it was both parents, and you wouldn't convert. And I think whilst we're very much part of the Indian culture and we'll wear saris, and a lot of our traditions and our food is very sort of in tune with the Indian culture,
Mm-hmm.
we're still different, if you like. We're
Okay.
still known to be a little different. Like
Wow.
Parsis are quite identifiable by their features,
Mm-hmm.
by the way they speak. We
Yeah.
speak Gujarati as well, but our accent might be a little bit different. So
Okay.
they
Okay.
can pick it out.
Okay.
And Parsis have always been people who valued education, right? So
Okay.
they've always been well educated. They try and support the society they're part of and give back to the society. So I think that part of the culture really resonates and is important to me, to uphold that sort of value system, if you like, right? So it's kind of, you allow people to be who they are, you
Uh-huh.
retain your identity
Uh-huh.
whilst working with them to support them to build something bigger and better and greater.
Wow, that is such a fascinating story. Thank you for sharing, Farah, and we learn a lot. I'm seeing something here concerning a Persian prophet, and you could correct me if I'm wrong. Is it Zoroaster?
So Zarathustra, yeah, but
Zarathustra.
Zoroaster, it depends on the spelling. It is
Right.
spelled
Okay.
Zoroastra as well,
There
or
you go.
Zarathustra, yeah.
What role did he play in that particular aspect of the religion?
So Zarathustra was the prophet, as you rightly
Mm-hmm.
said, and he brought down the sort of the message from the god and promoted the religion
Oh,
in ancient Persia. So the tenets, the philosophy of the religion came to us
mhm.
from Zarathustra, which is why we're called Zoroastrians, or
Okay,
the religion, the people who practice the religion are called Zoroastrians.
right. Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. That is some fascinating information, Farah. Really appreciate it. Now, tell us about the life that you had with your mother in terms of leading up to the time when you got that phone call, that emotional phone call. What was the experience like for you?
So I think the early years were quite turbulent. We were in
Mm-hmm.
India. I had just moved. I didn't speak the language. I was trying
Yeah,
to sort of fit into a society that was very new and very alien for me.
yeah.
Mum was trying to find her own feet. She was going back to train as a lawyer and finding sort of creating a life for herself. And
Yeah.
my father was not being supportive financially or emotionally or physically present. So it was a little bit turbulent for us to sort of settle back into the life that we were creating in India. Um, Teen years were probably a little bit fraught, shall we
Okay.
say,
Yeah.
because mom was the only parent, right? And I
Okay.
was a teen, and any angst, any teenage angst was directed to the one parent who was there.
Right. Right.
And then when I was 18, I left India to go back to England
Mm-hmm.
because India doesn't do dual nationality. So it was a
Yeah.
question of, do I keep my British passport or do I take the Indian passport? So to keep my British passport, I went back to England. And then as I was maturing and becoming an adult and finding my own voice and becoming my own person, because my mother was this huge personality,
Mm-hmm.
very, larger than life
Yeah.
personality. So it was discovering who I was outside of that, family shadow, if you like. Our relationship became more like friends. And then when I had my daughter, it completes that circle and that cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where, as my mother would say to me, the grandchildren are like your interest on your capital. It's
Wow.
sweeter,
Yeah. Yeah.
because it comes to you through whatever you've worked hard to
Mm-hmm.
invest.
Yes.
And that was really like a special sort of relationship there. And then, as you said, we got this really dreadful phone call. It was February 2006, and
Mm-hmm.
I was at home in Dubai.
Yeah.
And it was the middle of the night, and the phone rang, and it was my stepfather telling me my mother had been shot. And this was back
Oh,
in our hometown of Lucknow,
yeah.
and that I needed to get home as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So, it all sort of, that's the heart of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Mum was my foundation,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it sort of unravels from there on.
Wow. How would you put that in a framework? Through what lens uh, are you now seeing that experience, that the emotions that you would have felt when you got that phone call, understanding that that one important person in your life, wow, a sigh moment. How did you feel? How did you frame it?
I don't know if because there's no yardstick. This is
Mm,
not something that you figure out, what would you do in such a situation. So your emotions are all over the place, right?
yeah.
It's kind
Yeah.
of, it's disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
It is a lot of fear. The
Mm-hmm.
thought of losing the parent, there's a lot of fear associated with that. But there's
Right.
also the conviction that mom was so strong and she would make it through. And,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't possible that my mother wouldn't survive
Yeah.
whatever it was,
Yeah.
whatever the attack was. So there was all these mixed emotions, intermingled with the logistics of getting from Dubai to my hometown. And then subsequently, she was airlifted to Delhi. So it was flying into Delhi, making sure my children were okay,
Yeah.
letting my workplace know that I wouldn't be in for the foreseeable future.
Right.
So all of that, it was a whole lot going on in less than 12 hours between when I get the phone call and I leave for India, um, on the first available flight that I could get on.
Now, there is some level of emotional conflict that you would have felt during your formulative years because you said that your father abandoned you and your stepfather rejected you. How did you become relatable to that experience, knowing fully well that they could have done better? They should have played a greater role in formulating that cohesive partner with your mom, but they both disappointed you. Through what lens do you now describe that experience?
So I think as a child, whatever situation you're in tends to be what you believe is the norm, right? You don't know any different till you don't see different or you don't
Yeah.
experience different. So my father not being present was, put into the context when other kids might comment on me, or if I went out and saw other children sitting in their father's laps,
Yeah.
that's when I would realize that's when the absence would ache a little bit more for
Okay.
me, right?
Okay.
The lack of acceptance from my stepfather, it always stung. But again, the expectations on my father as well, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
he's my father, so there's more of the expectation there if you feel,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you think about it. Subsequently, mom married the gentleman she was dating who became my stepfather, but I think both of them absolutely, as you say, could have done better, had so many
Mm.
opportunities to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
better, right?
Yeah.
And when you go through therapy and counseling, people will always tell you, they must be wounded through their upbringing. And
Right.
I get that.
Uh-huh.
And we did the whole, you put them in the chair, you say whatever you have to say to them, you write out whatever you have to say, and, you put all of that out on paper. But at the same point, by the same token, you think, okay, you didn't know better as a young person, but as you mature, you realize that maybe there's ways to redress,
Yes.
or there's ways to repair the
Mm-hmm.
damage or the neglect or whatever you might have done that you wish you could do better. And yet there's no overtures to make that any better. So then you almost have to make a conscious choice, right? If you keep holding out an expectation to be disappointed, for me, it's maybe better to just
Mm-hmm.
distance myself from that
Yeah.
situation
Yeah.
to remove the expectation, because then that takes away the disappointment that invariably accompanies it, right?
Right. Yes.
Um, and I think part of my lesson through my journey has been about self-reliance, self-sufficiency. And I think that gets sort of reiterated each time.
Uh-huh.
And if I can master that, then there isn't the reliance or the expectation on any, so-called parental figure or the male parental figure, because they haven't shown up for me in the way that perhaps one would.
Wow. And I must commend you, Farah, because I hear strength and resilience in your voice as a regard of that experience. So your mom's name was Mihir, and you entitled the book after her name, and then you added you. Is there a specific meaning to her name? It sounds really
There,
mystical. Yes.
it is. So Meher in reverse is
Uh-huh.
Rehem, which is
Uh-huh.
God's tender mercies. So
Wow.
her name means God's tender mercies.
Wow. Wonderful.
So, and my name means joy. Farah means joy.
Okay.
So,
And you
just
you
in
do
case.
appear to be joyful at times, that engaging
Yeah.
smile and so on. It's lovely. So what enthused you to do the book and to get it out there? What is the main focus, the message that you really want people to see in that framework as you sent it out into the world of publication?
So I think it started out just as a story, right? My mother's at the heart of the story. That's why it's Meher and me. I'm almost the spectator,
Yeah.
taken along for the ride. And she was, on this grand adventure. Um, and it's a homage to her.
Mm-hmm.
It is a labor of love. She
Right.
is very much sort of holding that story together. And I think what I would say to people is all of us will face challenges,
Mm.
and all of us at some point or the other
Yeah.
may face grief or loss or a different kind of challenge,
Okay.
even sort of divorce in the family or having to learn to stand on your own feet. And it's hopefully shows them, A, they're not alone. There are ways you can find tools and support to get you through any experience you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
And if you trust in yourself and sort of invest in the journey, the healing journey, you will come through it and hopefully be able to help others through your own experience.
Yes.
Um, so I definitely think it's a story of a struggle, but it's also a story of hope, and it's, as you said, a story of resilience,
Yeah.
and strength developed through the challenges that life sort of sends your way or you
Mm.
encounter in life, right? I don't think any of us are born with that innate strength necessarily, but it's within us. It just
Yeah.
gets developed, and brought to the fore when the situation demands it.
Thank you for sharing. And that was passionate. And I really understand the concept and the philosophy. What is the response that you have gotten, Farah, from the publication? What are you hearing people saying that they're getting from it? What is the message they're seeing from the publication?
I've had really, great feedback. So a couple of comments. It's an easy read. People read it in one sitting. Once they started it, they didn't want to let it go.
Yeah.
A lot of heartfelt, emotional responses from gentlemen readers. In
Okay.
terms of when they've lost their parent, it's almost
Mhm.
unlocked them and given them permission to share.
Right.
Because I've been quite sort of open and honest about the story itself. So they've shared the loss of their parent or struggles with, illness or grief or loss in their families.
Hmm.
Um, and that, yes, it was sad in places and, there may be tissue boxes needed, but at the end, you come out hopefully smiling and knowing that you will get through it. And there are other people who've been on the same journey as you and are there to tell the story.
Right. Wonderful. So it says here, my mother, Meher, believed that we choose our lives for the lessons we will learn. What do you think she meant by that? What is she actually saying?
So I think mom was very spiritual. So mom
Hmm.
believed in life and rebirth and karma and deaths. And, you come into this life almost like a contract with your soul in terms of what challenges am I going to receive in this life? How will my soul become more enlightened or, learn more?
Yeah.
So she would always tell me if I ever complained about anything, just remember you chose this. And when I was younger, I would joke back and tease her, and I said, I'm sure I did not choose this particular hardship. And she'd be like, yeah, you did. And I think
Mm.
there's a lot of truth in that. Like life is not very random, right?
Yes.
We come into our life, there are predestined events that occur, there are challenges that come our way, but each of them is trying to bring out the best in us
Mhm.
and help us become stronger in ourselves, and find the strength that's within, but just harness it and bring it out and hopefully spread that and spread the message out.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Farah. So tell us a bit about on a lighter moment. Tell us a bit about the passion for baking. I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, so someone asked me, why do you call yourself a baker and not a cook? And
Uh-huh.
I had to stop and think, but it's when I want to get into the kitchen, I'm not going there because I'm hungry. So I'm not going to cook something for myself to eat. And even when I'm baking, it's not because I want to eat a piece of brownie or cake or apple pie. I'm going to create. It's
Ah.
almost that need to create that takes me to the kitchen. And especially if I've had a really busy day or there's a lot of sort of stuff in my head, it helps me unpack it and
Okay.
helps me almost unwind in a way because I find it therapeutic. I'm sure it's not everyone's cup of tea and other people might like other things, but I enjoy the process of baking, of creating that smell that arises when people eat it,
Mm.
the
Wow.
joy it spreads,
Mhm.
it's just, for me, it's soul food. And the entire process gives me joy. So it's creative. I'm working with my hands, I guess, to the extent that depending on what you're doing. Um, but yeah, I just enjoy, I've always enjoyed cooking. So I cook a lot, but I bake a lot. And typically I go into the kitchen to bake. I don't always go to cook unless, of course, needs must and all of that. So hence, I think I'm keeping that title of baker. So
And I guess you're entitled to it. So,
Yeah.
what do you love creating? I mean, is it like pastries or what? What is the thing that really brings that passion and that soothing moments out to you?
Anything and everything. So mainly
Wow.
cakes,
Hmm.
biscuits. It could be a cheesecake. It could be a carrot cake. It could be an apple pie. It could be anything. Like I just love creating something. It's almost like the dessert, the sweet ending to
Yeah.
whatever it is. It could be anything. Happy to try different recipes.
Okay. So you would do experimentations from time to time, right?
I do. I do. I'm
Okay.
not, tied to any one recipe or
Yeah.
any one
Yeah.
kind of cake.
Yeah. You're open to new ideas and
Yeah.
innovations. Wow. But you have the dreams of owning a cafe one day. Where did that
There,
come
that
from?
is true.
And what kind of cafe would that be?
So I think part of the Indian culture is hospitality,
Uh-huh.
right? We're very hospitable. And when people come to your home, it's invariably death by a thousand, snacks. You sort of
Hmm.
show your love with food.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's linked to that hospitality, hosting people. The
Yeah.
cafe would be my way of hosting people, putting on the cakes that I like, getting the menu that I want, the ambience, from the
Okay.
smell to the music to the way it looks. I've all got it up in my head.
Wow.
Um, and hopefully it'll come to be. But it's just something that I've always wanted to do, and purely because I enjoy baking, I enjoy cooking, I enjoy food, feeding people. So it
Mhm.
feels like that would be the way to do it.
Yeah. Sounds good. I hope that it finally works out for you one day. Sounds really good.
I hope so.
What about yoga? You have a passion for yoga. Where did that come from?
So growing up in India, yoga, astrology, meditation, it's all part and parcel, and it's weaved into, the everyday life and
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
And then when I was a young adult in London, I was going to yoga a lot. And then when mom passed, I'm not great at sitting still and
Mhm.
meditating, but yoga was an active meditation, and
Okay.
it helped me harness the mind. And it was building strength in my body, but helping
Mhm.
me build strength in my mind as well,
Yeah.
and giving me
Yeah.
that balance and focus and moment of stillness and just introspection in a quiet space. After a busy day in the office or having dealt with the kids or whatever, it was a moment where there could be a bit of silence and I could just get that pause in my mind to allow, the emotions to come through, or allow me to just review what I was feeling or just get in touch with how I was feeling. But more than anything, I feel the strength and the centering. Like if I'm strong in my body, I'm strong in my mind. If I'm ever feeling not great physically, it impacts how strong you feel in terms of being able to deal with challenges. So for me, it's been a great tool to help me find that balance, the inner strength, the stability. And these are physical attributes, but also mental attributes that just help me get through my days.
Yeah. Creates the opportunity for balance holistically.
Mm.
Thank you for sharing, Farah. Your life is so fascinating. Your story is an amazing one, and there are so many facets to it. I wonder, in reflection, when you look back and you think about the book and the experiences with your mom, and what part of it really stands out to you, the thing that you will always remember and maybe probably never forget about it.
I think my childhood in India is
Hmm.
probably a standout because that those were formative years.
Yeah.
Not all of it was great, but what it has given me is my value system. It's
Okay.
given me my foundation for what I believe is the right way to be. It's given me my love of food. It's given me my love of hospitality. It's given me my cultural references. So my upbringing in India, I think, was something that, in a huge way, goes towards defining who I am.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Farah. Farah, what is your greatest message to the world? And let me put it this way. Let's say you have this giant megaphone and almost 8 billion people, the populace on earth, can hear you. And you have just this one chance to say something that you know is going to leave a lasting impact on them. what would you say? What would the message be to the world?
So probably, I think I would start with the way the book opens. It's good thoughts, good
Mhm.
words, and good deeds,
Okay.
right? And that's the message from our religion, Humatahu Katahu Varashta. It's about if you can find a way to control your thoughts, if you
Hmm.
can think good thoughts. It's about, the messaging that's out there today, visualization or think good thoughts, or,
Yeah.
make sure they're positive thoughts.
Yes.
If what you say is aligned to those thoughts and, is good words, you try and be kind with your words.
Yeah.
Good deeds, you try and do acts of kindness, or you try and act with integrity and
Mhm.
honesty. I think that will stand anybody in good stead, no matter what they're doing. Whenever, um, if I find my actions are not aligned to my thoughts and my words, I feel
Mhm.
out of balance. And if I take a moment to reflect, I need to come back to make sure my thoughts and my words and my actions are in alignment. And then, you're in the flow.
Yeah. Great. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing, Farah. Is there a follow up to that publication? Is there another book in the making? Maybe a sequel or something?
there's definitely material to
Yeah.
create another book. And a lot of people have been asking for the recipes of the goodies I bake,
Right.
which I take
Right.
into the office of my friends. So who knows? Watch the space, I guess.
Okay. So the future looks bright and encouraging. So, as we're about to wrap up, I want to ask you this. In terms of your personal life and the achievements that you have made so far, when you look at some of the people in the world, particularly young people, what kind of advice would you give them if they're experiencing dysfunctional family lives, a situation where one parent is missing and they need to get that balance, they want to get the coping skills? What would you say to them that would help them have that kind of mindset that they could believe in themselves still and choose a good path in life?
That's such a interesting question, and there's so many people out there, right,
Yeah,
who have
yeah,
struggles in life, right?
yes,
Not everyone has means, including my children. I
right.
got divorced, and I would say, if they can, seek the tools to help, like things
Uh-huh.
like a counselor or therapy, or someone independent
Right.
to talk to, an aunt, an uncle, a close friend,
Yeah,
someone who you can confide in, who will
mhm,
not judge, but is there as a sounding board to hold space for you as you go through your emotional journey on it. I would definitely encourage any kind of physical activity. I do
yeah,
yoga. Somebody else might like walking or swimming or dance or whatever gives you that joy and just helps you move your body because the emotions move through it, I
yes,
feel.
yes.
Um, and I think a little bit of faith and trust
Mhm.
that the universe will not send you more than you can deal with, and you've got this. Not to look, too far into the future. I find if I'm getting overwhelmed because I think, oh my God, I'm on my own and kids and university and how will I go? But it's one day at a time. If for today the kids were well, I had food on the table, we've got a roof over our head, we're good.
Yes.
So try and take it one day at a time. Focus on the things you can impact and change. Stay positive.
Hmm.
Have faith. Say your gratitudes. Send your wishes up.
Yeah.
Dream big. Work hard, and I think it'll all be okay.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that, Farah. So I'm just going to put you on the spot a little bit, but you can also have some fun as well.
Sure.
Um, you have these two backgrounds, British, um, the Far East and India, and you currently live in Dubai. Now, in India, the greatest passion I think for sport is cricket. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct. You are right.
In England, I can't say London
Football.
because London it's soccer, right? But there's
It
also
is.
a great desire for cricket in England as well. It's a
That is true. That
right.
is. It's a gentleman's sport. Yes, it
There you go.
is.
Which one more passionate for you in the terms of the two sport? Is it cricket or soccer?
I would say cricket because I grew up with cricket. So
Ah,
I'm not great at it, but I grew up with it. So if I was told I had to sit and watch sport, I would
uh-huh.
probably elect for cricket over soccer.
Okay. When it comes to the continental dishes, those that you are familiar with in India as opposed to the European side in England, which one would you choose?
Well, I kind of think the national dish for the UK is chicken tikka masala. So I
Aha.
kind of think I have to go with the Indian side.
Okay.
The Brits have chosen the Indian
Yeah.
side. So I
Yeah.
think we have to stick with the Indian.
All right, great. Farah, you have been a wonderfully amazing and valuable guest on our program. Let's just read. Really thank you for the opportunity to have been with you, all the wonderful things that you have shared with regards to your experience and the book, Meher and Me. So, folks, this is Andy of Andy's Personal Development saying thanks to you for your continued support and commitment on our program. Let's just read. Remember, we believe in getting people to go back to the process of reading where they could get enlightenment, information, and knowledge for the personal growth and development of their soul, the being that desires to be fed with the good things that the good Lord has created for all of us to enjoy in this life. So I'm not seeing, let me just make sure with regards to the comments. No, I don't have any comments now, but I know I will have some later on as the day progresses. Today is a national holiday in Trinidad and Tobago. We are celebrating 61 years of independence. Still a young
Wow.
budding nation. So a happy Independence Day to all
Happy
people
Independence Day
in
to you all.
Trinidad and Tobago, 61st independence anniversary. So it has been a wonderful time. And Farah, we thank you for spending the time with us. Until next time, this is Andy of Andy's Personal Development on Let's Just Read, saying so long to you guys. Keep the faith, keep reading, keep being enlightened. Godspeed, God bless. Shalom, namaste. Bye for now, folks.